often have you said, if only I had this, I'd be able to do certain things? If only I had this money, if only I had this personnel, if only I had these musicians, if only I had this building, if only I had. Do you know, friends, that can lead to such frustration. And it's an unreasonable thing to say, if only I had. Very often when we do this, we neglect what we really have. Someone said you don't miss the water till the well has run dry. And it is so true. We don't realize how much we have until it's gone. And so in this little talk today, I just want to share with you the reasonableness of God. Remember, God has everything. And it's so remarkable that God doesn't really need us, and yet he chooses to use us. I find that absolutely remarkable. We read in the scriptures about this reasonableness of God so many times. I want to center on a couple, and also I want to bring an illustration. The first one is Moses. Moses is a man who's defeated, a man who's had a great start in life. He has a testimony that would fill every building of what God has done, the way God had preserved him, the way God had brought him through, the way God had brought him into a palace situation and brought him into such remarkable places and education and all of those things. And yet he blew it in one moment when he killed a man. Sought to bury him in the sand. Sometimes that's what we try to do with our failures, bury them in the sand. But the problem is they have a way of popping up when the wind blows. And so it was with Moses that he had been discovered. He ran for his life. And we pick up the account 40 years later, when he's gone about his daily business, looking after the sheep, and he's out there seeing something that's normal, a bush that's burning. But as he looks, he sees that there's something different about this bush, and he realizes that it's not being consumed. It's a fire that doesn't consume. And he discovers that God is in that fire, and that God speaks to him. And in the course of the conversation, he's rehearsing to him that he wants him to go back to the place of his failure, back into the presence of the king and the court and the buildings which he knew how to walk through, he knew how to address, he knew all of those things. God had been preparing him for this for a long time. And he said, I can't. The people won't believe me. How can you help me? Listen to what God says. What's in your hand? What's in your hand, Moses? A rod? A staff? Put it on the floor, Moses. So, put it on the floor. And it becomes a snake. Then God says, take it by the tail, Moses. And he takes it by the tail, picks it up, and it becomes the rod. That's Exodus 4 and verse 2. What's in your hand? God didn't say, what haven't you got? He said, what have you got? A rod. Doesn't seem a great deal, does it, when you're going to face this great Pharaoh with all of his power and might and say, let my people go? Well, later on we see that God takes Moses through all of these things, all the plagues and all the situations, and he sees the frustration of the plague working and then Pharaoh changing his mind. Oh my. He changed his mind more times than the English weather changes in a day. And then there came that moment when Pharaoh got to the stage where he was happy to see the back of this group of people. And off they went. Such rejoicing, such happiness, such joy. And they were on the way until they came to the Red Sea. And when they got to the Red Sea, they suddenly discovered there was a problem before them. There was a problem behind them because Pharaoh's armies were coming. And they turned on Moses. Aren't there enough graves in Egypt for us? It's amazing how such change comes. But as they went on, Moses speaks to the one he's been trusting. And God said, stretch out the rod over the waters. There was nothing magical in the rod. But if you read Exodus 4 and verse 20, you'll find there that it's termed the rod of God. Ah, yes, it was still in Moses' hand, but it was the God's rod. He had taken ownership of it. And so that day he stretches out the rod over the waters part, and the people of God go over on dry land. And the waters recede, and we find that the armies of the Egyptians are drowned. You see, Moses gave to God what he got. Some of you years ago, my first late wife, Christine, had something called motor neuron disease. And I remember she would sit in a chair and she couldn't do anything. She couldn't seemingly do anything. And I remember one day a gentleman comes into our home. His name was Roger. He was someone who had come from a medical background, and he'd come to give some help to Chris. And this is what he said as he walked into the room. Hello, Christine. What moves? He could have spent ages saying what doesn't move. But he said, what moves? At that time, when sat in a chair, she could move her foot at her ankles. She could move her feet up and down. And Roger said, Christine, I can get you typing again. And he put an electronic box on a typewriter so that it was equipped so that she could type again. And all he simply said was, what moves? And she got to typing. She typed. She ran something called missionettes in the church till 1 week before she died. She typed up all the paperwork for a building extension that we did of the church. She typed it all. She did it all. And all she had was 2 feet that could move up and down. And she did it. What is in your hand? Oh, if Roger had come in that day and said, what can't you do? It would have been masses. The length of the list would have been great. But he said, what moves? God comes to you today. And he's not asking you for anything you haven't got. He's saying, what have you got in your hand? Can you bake a cake? There's someone down the road who maybe you could bless with a lovely homemade cake. Can you dig a garden? There's someone down the road who maybe just needs you to tidy their garden for them. Maybe they're not able to do it themselves now, but you could do it. What's in your hand today? Don't sit there sighing for some life work grand. Just do that which is in your hand. God bless you.